Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us for a mental health and wellbeing webinar. My name's Julie Shaw, and I'll be hosting today's session. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land on which we meet today. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Now, today's webinar has been created to connect directly with you, the tax practitioner community. We understand it's been a difficult couple of years, and we're very pleased to have Beyond Blue joining us today to share some valuable mental health information. So following the webinar today, we'll provide you with a copy of today's presentation slides, and we'll send these to you via the email address that you used to register for today's session. You can also access the slides now by visiting our webinar resources hub, and that's located on our website at tpb.gov.au/webinar-hub. I'd also like to remind you that today's webinar will count towards your continuing professional education, or CPE, and you can claim 1 hour for attending today's session. So let's have a look at what we're going to be discussing today. So in today's webinar, we'll share some key ways you can improve your mental health and navigate stressful situations. In particular, we're going to look into what support is available. We'll look at trends in mental health this year. We'll look at the current state of mental health in Australia. We'll talk about action areas, how to build wellbeing. We'll look at self-care. We'll also talk about checking in and building protections. And then we'll share some small business statistics with you as well. And then to finish up, we're going to answer some of the questions that we received during the webinar today. So please make sure that you submit your questions via the chat box. So just before I do introduce our speakers, I just want to briefly remind you about some of the concessions that the TPB have in place at the moment around our CPE and mental health matters. So as I said, we do understand that many tax practitioners are likely still struggling with the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we recognise it's important for you to manage your mental health and wellbeing during these difficult times. So that's why we've put some temporary measures in place to help support you. So firstly, we have been accepting a small amount of educative health and wellbeing activities, and that's up until the 30th of June 2022. And these activities can include such things as attending webinars about how to manage your mental health, just like today. And it can also be relevant CPE activities in any sort of mental health activity that you can count towards your TPB CPE hours. Secondly, we've also removed the 25% cap for relevant technical or professional reading. So that is also lifted until the 30th of June 2022. So that gives you a little bit of flexibility when you can't attend face-to-face events. Importantly, I guess I'd also like to highlight today that we do encourage you to contact us if your ability to meet your tax practitioner obligations is impacted in any way due to the pandemic, or also with the recent flooding that's occurred. So if you do need some assistance, get in touch with us and we'll work with you to resolve any outstanding matters that you may have. I also want to just point out too that we have a new CPE policy for tax and BAS agents, which is going to commence on the 1st of July this year. And under that policy, one of the key changes includes allowing tax practitioners to complete mental health and wellbeing activities up to a maximum of 10% of the required CPE hours. So the good news there is that you will still be able to continue to claim mental health and wellbeing activities as relevant CPE going forward. Okay, I'm just going to introduce our speakers now. So we're very fortunate to have a couple of speakers joining us today from Beyond Blue. For those who are less familiar with the organisation, Beyond Blue have been providing support and services to people in Australia for 20 years and is the country's most well-known and visited mental health organisation. So I'd like to welcome our speakers from Beyond Blue. We have Mel Novak, a small business engagement manager, Linda Sheehan, a workplace engagement manager, and Tim Hootman, who's a small business advisor. So I just want to say a big thank you to you for joining us today. And Linda, I'm going to hand over to you so that you can kick off the presentation for us today.
Thank you so much, Julie. On behalf of Tim, Mel and Beyond Blue, thank you so much for having us back, those that joined us 6 months ago. We are so grateful to be here and we really hope this session is helpful. As Julie noted, I'll do an introductory 15 minutes and I'll just cover off community trends of mental health and some of the current evidence around wellbeing best practice, really what the research says, what the evidence says. This will then lead the way for Tim, who's going to share some personal practical reflections around how he practices wellbeing, how he brings that research to life. And then we'll have a Q&A and we'll ask some structured questions, but also put your questions in the chat and we'll get to those as well. Next slide, please. So before we start, a very quick reminder about some of the free support services available. If you are ever in doubt, please reach out. We've included Beyond Blue on this slide, but there are a range of other really nuanced and community-based services also. I think a really interesting part that we are seeing is the range of services is changing. So there's more and more web chat, SMS, as well as traditional calls. So as I said, if you ever are in doubt, please reach out. You can get brief counselling, you can connect to services in your local area and also advice on how to support others. Next slide, please. So to kick off with some scene setting, on the last 6 months and more generally across the pandemic and some of those longer term learnings that we're starting to see. It's not really been the start to 2022 that many of us had hoped for, and I'm sure I'm not no surprises there, but I think it's useful to remember that context when we're talking about mental health and what people are experiencing. The easing of restrictions and borders has helped many at work and personally. We can trade and we can plan holidays again. At the same time, people and businesses are still managing disruptions from outbreaks, time unwell, and that economic hangover that many of us are seeing and experiencing. We're seeing significant community challenges, particularly from flooding on the East Coast. At the same time, many communities are still recovering from drought and fire and its ongoing economic and social impacts. We're experiencing rising costs. This includes petrol, inflation, and preparing for interest rate rises. At work, we're seeing ongoing pressures from people changing jobs, people adjusting to hybrid work, and workforce shortages in many areas. Many workplaces, as I mentioned, are still tackling those economic costs and changes that are hung over from those other cost increases. This has also been, as we've noted, a particularly challenging time for smaller businesses, and we'll get to that a bit more specifically at the end. The first part of this presentation, though, we're trying to keep quite general, the idea being we really want to get something for everyone watching today, things that you can all do individually to help boost your wellbeing. So next slide, please. This summarises some really interesting upcoming data from the National Study of Mental Health and Wellbeing, which has been run by the Australian Bureau of Statistics. It's the first time in a while in Australia we're starting to see some really high quality emerging national data on prevalence and distress. The full data set's coming out in a few months, and this is from some of the early insights of that report. The slide highlights that on one hand, there has been increasing distress across the community. If you look to that table, over 2021, 15% of adults have experienced high or very high levels of distress. And you can see that comparative increase compared with 3 years earlier, with greater distress across all age groups, but in particular young adults and middle adults, and it's trending down sort of the older that we get. We're also seeing trends around loneliness and household financial stress. At the same time, we're seeing some really positive indicators also, and this is around people accessing mental health support and people taking actions to look after their mental health. This includes increased exercise, practicing positive thinking, and people doing things they enjoyed. These trends, whilst very positive, The numbers in those categories aren't that high, in that we've got 37% have increased their physical exercise and only 28% have done things they enjoy. What this suggests is that while we are seeing these significant improvements in people taking action, we've got this incredible opportunity around more preventative activity for mental health and wellbeing. Next slide, please. So what are some of the action areas and what do I mean by preventative mental health? This slide shows the range of areas where we can do things around mental health and some of those bigger categories. And this ranges from responding to mental health challenges, things like the availability of supports and being able to identify where we see someone in distress or we might be in distress. And it's about offering and managing that support. Generally in Australia, we've come a long way there. We're doing really well. We're doing much better. This is where the Are You OK campaign fits, where we look out and we ask people if they're doing okay. It's about having so many more supports available, and we're seeing stigma coming down. Where there's opportunity, and that more systemic opportunity, is around how we protect against mental health risks, how we go about identifying the things that might really impact us individually, organisationally, at work and at home, how we build up protections around those risks, and how we build up good health. Next slide, please. Now, this sort of just gives a conceptual example of what I mean there. I mentioned Are You OK before, and that's a really great example of when people are in distress, a high-profile public campaign in Australia, really showing us to look out for each other in times of struggle. For most other health conditions, though, we have a stronger focus on the things we can all do every day to either screen for possible challenges, but also really stay healthy. Our good old slip, slop, slaps, the good old life be in it, our understanding of the importance of things like nutrition, and other things we do for everyone to stay well and the importance that we put on it. Beyond Blue has started looking more deeply into this, including a community survey at the end of last year. And a key finding of that survey was that people really told us that they want clearer, trustworthy information regarding where to start and how to continue promoting their mental health in a way that's tailored and relevant to them. So if you look on social media, for example, there's often a lot of info, but there's not that really sustained, clear, evidence-based rationale of what works. And that's where we've started doing more thinking. Next slide, please. So this slide, another interesting finding that we found, we've done a bit of a review of the literature and spoken with experts, really trying to delve into what that definition of wellbeing is and what are the things that we can do? How do we start telling people that what and that how? A really interesting finding is at the moment, there are a lot of competing definitions. And what we've done here is brought the key elements of those key definitions together, and we're giving you a wellbeing buffet or a wellbeing menu, helping to identify some of those key areas, what they do, and where we can start to build on them. So these 6 areas, I'll whip through them quite quickly. The first one there is about developing positive emotional skills. These are things such as building a positive mindset, practicing reflection, gratitude, emotional flexibility. This is some of your resilience skills, and it also includes things like mindfulness. The next 2 categories, that eudaimonic purpose, this is about the things that give us purpose or a sense of life satisfaction. It's the activities that give us meaning, agency, or accomplishment. That means different things to different people, but it might be through work, it might be through community, it might be through learning, it might be through family. But the core theme is building that purpose for that quiet contentment you feel inside. The next one, hedonic well-being, is more about a sense of happiness or pleasure. These are activities that might light your spark, bring you joy, be stimulating, or give a sense of novelty. These 2 together a really common theme of many definitions of traditional well-being. I had a colleague who used to wish us purpose and pleasure in equal measure. The fourth category on that slide, the next one, is really about positive relationships. Looking for areas in your life of connection, belonging, and shared experience. The fifth is about, it's related to the fourth, but it's sort of looking more to those times of challenge. It's about having a support network and the ability to give and receive help. The last category of things we can do to build well-being, we've called it health hygiene, and these are those traditional behaviours around sleep, nutrition, and exercise. Some high-level findings that we're starting to see around these key categories. First one is probably fairly obvious, but the more activities that we do across those different areas, the better our well-being, and the more they start to reinforce each other. There's also benefit in practicing it intentionally. Often we might do these things, but we're just doing them by the wayside. The more we can be mindful of it and savor what we're doing, that has well-being benefits and starts to pull into those positive emotional skills. And probably the biggest finding is that our understanding of these categories differ quite significantly. A lot of people can probably name a few. We're pretty good at naming those health hygiene behaviours, and we know that sleep's good for us, and as is exercise. But people often don't think to some of those purpose-based activities, the importance of social connection, and even the role of doing enjoyable things in order to stay well. And this is where I think helping link people to some of those activities, practice them in a plan and practice them mindfully, is a great opportunity for us all to reflect on a bit more, so that when we're going through challenging times, we can really lean into and prioritise them. Next slide, please. I'll mention this one really quickly. It's an example of how those tools might work in relation to a challenge. So the first line there, many people at the moment have reported experiencing difficulty switching off, particularly if we're working at home, but whatever we're doing, a lot of us are still buzzing at the end of the day, having difficulty focusing. You might be watching TV, checking your phone, and doing 7 other things at the same time, and often that can disrupt our sleep. This is where a strategy like mindfulness can be very useful and very targeted to that challenge. And that gives us skills around slowing down racing thoughts. As a second wellbeing activity, we can couple with that something like a purpose for a pleasure activity, something that can really spark joy in that moment. Once we've reset and help build and reinforce that focus and way moving forward. I might stop there and we can explore this a bit more in the question time if of interest, but essentially this is starting to show how we can frame up some of those challenges, identify strategies, and employ those wellbeing skills. Next slide, please. This shows, to help on the journey, some of the great tools that we can use to both check in on how we're going and develop those tools to help us on the way. These are all available on the Beyond Blue website, and we can include links with those resources afterwards that Julie mentioned. But essentially, there are ways that can check in and help nudge us towards certain activities, so the anxiety checklist to one side, and then planning tools that help us really lean into those challenges that we might face, pick from the wellbeing buffet, and start to put plans in place for when we're not feeling so great. Next slide, and this is the last bit for me. I wanted to very quickly touch on small business. Now, I mention this because almost 97% of small businesses businesses in Australia are small businesses, and almost half the Australian workforce is working in a small business. I imagine many of you watching today, you probably work with small businesses, have a few small business clients. Many of you may also be working in small businesses, sole traders or practitioners on your own. Not everyone, but it'll be a big chunk. Everyone knows someone working in small business. Now, the research tells us that the small business community is particularly vulnerable to stress. It's sort of the high risk, high reward, where it can be incredibly high highs, but also very challenging lows as well. Running a small business can be isolating, stressful, particularly during times of financial hardship. And we know that the last few years have impacted small business in ways we've not seen before. We also know that the people that work with the small business community, and particularly trusted advisors such as tax practitioners, are a key source of trusted advice and support, and have been identified by small businesses as a really key potential role to play in looking after the mental health of others. We'll get into that a bit more in the Q&A, but I just wanted to flag that and the role that we can all play in our own well-being, but also in the well-being of others. That's all for me for now in terms of the research, the evidence and the bookish stuff, but I'll hand over to Tim, who's going to talk a bit more about those really practical examples and how we can bring it to life. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Linda. My name is Tim Hootman, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here again speaking to the tax practitioners. It's a real joy. I've been a small business owner for over 20 years, and I've been a Beyond Blue speaker for over 4 years. And it gives me great joy to be able to speak about better mental health and the things that I do to take care of my mental health, and the things I do literally every day that certainly helps me keep on track and fill up my cup, especially when times have been quite challenging, as we've seen that over the past, in particular, 2 and 3 years. Thanks for the next slide. I'm going to talk to you about something that I love sharing with other people, and it's called my mental health toolkit. I've been a small business owner. I've faced lots of challenges like many people over the last couple of years. And one of the things that I've learned in particular over probably the last 5 to 10 years is I need to take personal responsibility in taking care of my mental health. It resides with me. I need to focus on it every day. And I also need to make sure that when I think about taking care of my mental health, I make sure that I understand that it's not a selfish act. So for all of you out there, taking care of your mental health should be a really high priority, should be something that you focus on every day, and it should never be seen as a selfish act. Because when we put ourselves first in terms of our mental health, when we look after ourselves, when we're taking care of ourselves, then we put ourselves in the best position to take care of other people around us. And that's a really joyous thing, looking after ourselves, but then also being able to support other people. So let's talk a little bit about what I do on an ongoing and regular basis. The first area I want to focus on is lifestyle. So if I think about my lifestyle, there's some great things that help me take care of my mental health. I mentioned I'm a speaker for Beyond Blue. I'm a volunteer speaker. Volunteering is a great way to give back and to fill up your cup and make you feel really worthwhile. And it's all about helping other people. And it's a really great way to look after yourself while you're helping others. But the main thing for me when it comes to lifestyle is exercise. That helps keep me grounded. I am a swimmer. I live in Sydney. I swim at Bronte Beach whenever I can. But even when I'm traveling, like at the moment, I'm actually in Brisbane, I find a pool or somewhere that I can go to do my swimming. Whatever that exercise is for you, think about how you can focus on that on a regular basis. Daily is really good, but if you don't quite get to it daily, then how are you doing it, on a regular and consistent basis? It's really, really important. And certainly for me, it sets up my day. If I'm having a swim in the pool and I'm doing a bit of mindfulness, which we were chatting about before from Linda, those are the sort of things that help set up my day for success. It helps keep me centered. So think about for you, what are those exercises that you love doing that are going to help you on a daily basis? If I think about keeping my thoughts positive, sometimes that's really challenging when we are inundated with often quite dramatic, sometimes quite negative messages on the news, on social media. So how am I keeping those thoughts positive? Gratitude. Gratitude really helps me. So when I'm swimming in the morning, if I'm just doing a little mindfulness, if I'm taking a walk, I think about the things that I'm grateful for. And I say them in my head, and sometimes I say them out loud. So I would encourage you every day to think about the things that you are grateful for and see how that has a positive impact on your thoughts, how it probably makes you feel a little bit better. Sociability is really important. And it's been challenging for a lot of us who are very sociable people over the last few years through lockdown. But in particular, we can still stay connected with people in many different ways. Here's a great example of connecting with many people through video conferences and online webinars. But how do you stay social with your friends, your family, your networks? How are you then making sure that you're connecting with these people on a regular basis so that it helps you and kind of fills your cup up, makes you feel warm? It's good for your mental health. So a couple of things there. One of them is I love to thank people when I'm out and about. Sometimes it's just saying hello to them. Sometimes it's thanking them for their service. You might be at the supermarket. You might be at anywhere. You might be on the train, or just saying hello or thanking people for the service they're providing is a great way to make you feel good. But also watch the smile it often puts on other people's faces. That generosity is a great thing to do in a social environment. I'll say hello to lots of people. I don't always expect something in return, but it just kind of makes me feel good. Spread that little joy around when you're out and about. But in particular, make sure that you're staying social, make sure you're staying connected. If you can't do that in person, do that online. Somehow, another great thing is I will call people and leave a voice message for them, or just leave a voice text message. Hearing someone's voice, the inflection in it, the joy of the message that they're leaving you to connect with you is a great way to stay connected with people. So think about a couple of those things, but in particular, maybe just on your way to work or whenever you're out and about, just thank people and just say hello. See what reaction you get. It's really, really quite cool. And our work boundaries. It's really important. Our work environment. It's really important that we have boundaries around that. I think when I think about work, it's such a large part of our everyday. But how do we make sure that in conjunction with our work, we are taking care of our mental health? We put boundaries around when we start work and when we finish. We're really clear to ourselves, if we're business owners, or to our managers, on how best we work. And when we need a bit of time off, putting a hand up and asking for that early rather than later. If you're sharing with your manager in particular, say that in a work environment, or your team, if you're a leader, on how you're coping with things, sometimes that makes it a little easier for other people in that sort of environment. So think about work as not only a very important part of your day, but also how you can take care of yourself at work. What are you doing that will make sure that you're taking care of yourself, that you're looking after your mental health? No is a great response at times when you just don't have capacity. And no is a complete sentence. And while it's often hard to do, it's a really good thing to do at times, because it just might give you that break that you need. So there's some of the tips that I have for looking after myself and my mental health. The encouragement that I would give to each and every one of you is to give some of those things a try. Do them on a consistent and regular basis. Mix it up. Most importantly, find the things that bring you joy. And remember, as Linda put up on one of her earlier slides, seek support when you need it. Support is out there. There's some wonderful resources. There's some wonderful organizations. And there are also some wonderful people at the end of a phone if you need to call some of these great institutions such as Beyond Blue. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Tim. That was such useful information, and I think everyone will get something from what you just covered up there. So I am going to hand back again to Linda and to Mel for part 3.
Hello, thanks again, Julie. I'm now going to be joined by Mel and Tim. We're going to have a couple of pre-prepared questions and then jump to audience questions as well. So anything that you might have, please jump in the chat. Otherwise, to get us started, I was keen to ask a question of Mel. Now, last time we caught up 6 months ago, Mel spoke quite beautifully about some of the challenges that have been faced by small business and really the importance of communities around small business, including advisors, to protect their mental health. I was hoping you could share a little bit about some recent insights from the new Access for Small Business Owners service and any of the real trends and insights that we're starting to see around mental health, small business, and really what it's like on the ground. If you could take it away, that would be fabulous.
Yeah, sure. That would be my pleasure, and thanks so much for that question, Linda. I think first of all, it would be really good to have a refresher on what Nazbo is in a nutshell. So the Nazbo program is effectively a mental health coaching program for small business owners. It's completely free. There's no cost for small business owners. It's completely confidential, which is something that was very important to small business owners. It's accessible Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And what's really important about this program, what is perhaps most unique and most appealing to small business owners, is that all of the coaches that deliver the coaching are small business owners themselves. So they've walked in the same shoes as a small business owner. They know what it's like to run a small business. They know what the challenges are like, and therefore they can relate to the participants that are coming through the program. In terms of the recent trends that we're seeing, that's a really good question. We've had phenomenal success since the program was launched last March, and we had thought that we would see a lower level of inquiries since lockdowns and restrictions. We would think perhaps a thing of the past. Now that we're moving into 2022, we had thought perhaps we would see a lower level of inquiries into the program, but that just hasn't been the case. We've actually seen more people accessing the program with the advent of Omicron virus and all of the uncertainty that brought about towards the end of last year and the beginning of this year, with businesses having to close, staff shortages, people not being able to work, businesses having to close again despite not having to go into lockdown. That caused a phenomenal amount of stress within the small business owner community. We've also seen the impact of floods again in northern New South Wales and Queensland, and even the impact of conflict in Europe. I know that might sound strange, but that just has that war in Europe has raised levels of uncertainty and fear and anxiety in a lot of people, and again raised this question about what will the future hold. A lot of small business owners had really hoped that 2022 was going to be the year that we would have some stability and calm, and that just hasn't proven to be the case. And so we have seen a high level of inquiries so far this year into the program. In terms of what we're seeing so far, we've had over, since the program launched last March, we've seen 1,673 small business owners attend assessments, which is a phenomenally high number of people accessing the program. The recovery rate is almost 70%, which is just fantastic. So just to give you an idea of what that means, it means that people who enter the program are coming in with issues such as stress, anxiety, depression, low motivation, low mood. And at the time that they leave the program, which is just after 6 sessions, that all it is, each session is about 45 minutes to half an hour. After that period of time, they are recovered, and the recovery rate is almost 70%. So that is extremely pleasing to see. That's really successful in comparison to other programs that Beyond Blue run. We're seeing the average age is about 40. We're seeing women, generally a higher level of women using the program than men. There's about a 60-40 split. Got a high level of participants coming from Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland in the main. However, we have seen participants accessing the program from all over Australia. We've got a high level of people coming into the program who are reporting work-related stress as the main reason why they want to access the program, but also financial distress is becoming a really key driver for people accessing the program, particularly for reasons such as commercial debt and commercial rent, and having issues paying that now because of an inability to work. In terms of sectors where we're seeing high levels of participation, arts and recreation is the #1 sector, followed by healthcare and social assistance, and then retail, construction, tourism, and those are all really big contenders in terms of where we're seeing people accessing the program. In terms of the positive news, we've had really high levels of participants exiting the program and saying that hope has returned, and not only that, but they would recommend to another small business owner coming through the program. So in January, 100% of participants who took part said that they would recommend to another small business owner. And it's actually quite interesting to say, and it's actually following on from a point you mentioned earlier, Linda, we see really high levels of referrals coming from trusted advisors, such as tax practitioners. Small business owners do tend to show low levels of help-seeking behaviour, but they do tend to listen to people that they trust, such as their accountants or financial planners or people that they trust. We've actually had a high level of referrals coming through trusted advisors. And in fact, after the session that we ran with the Tax Practitioners Board last year, we saw a high volume of inquiries come through from that webinar from people who went away from this session and talked to their clients that they were worried about and passed on the details. And it just shows how powerful that referral process is when the referral is coming from a trusted source. So we're really grateful for that, and we've seen tremendous success from referrals coming from those sources.
Thank you so much, Mel. That was such a rich answer. We've got a couple more questions around Nazbo in the chat, but I'm going to throw to Tim just with a slightly different question, particularly mindful of those that don't have a small business background on the line as well. Now, Tim, you spoke briefly about, well, not briefly, you spoke beautifully about the importance of self-care and some of the strategies that you use. I'm mindful a lot of people are really tired at the moment. We didn't get the reset we were looking for. And I think this is a thread I'm seeing in some of the questions, but we'll get to things we can do at work shortly. To start with, can you maybe talk us through how you approach self-care on those really tough days, when you've had a setback, when you're not feeling like it, when you might have fallen off the bandwagon briefly? How do you get back on? How do you approach it through the tougher times and the rougher days and build up that motivation again? Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. That's a great question, because that often happens, has happened to me. I've hear other people say it happens to them. First and foremost is one of the great things is we should do is acknowledge that these things happen and don't punish yourself. I talked a little bit before about, exercise and the daily routine and all of those things. If perchance you don't get to it on a day, please don't spend time punishing yourself about it. You'll get it to it the next day. You'll fall back into your routine. Things happen in our lives that cause us not to be able to do something. So first and foremost, don't punish yourself. And I think the next answer to the question is, when things are a little harder, what I do is I sometimes go and try and reframe it. So there's a lot of challenges in the world. They seem to be continuing, and when one seems to be dissipating, something else happens. So I've learned that I've had to reframe it, in particular over the last 2 years, and not focus on the whole, but bring it back down to how is Tim focusing in Tim's community, work, family, life, my situation. How am I focusing? Yes, there's all the other stuff going on, but how am I focusing on me? And remember that it's not a selfish act. And at times when you think, oh my gosh, look at everything that's going on for everybody else, don't worry about that all the time. Focus in on you and taking care of you. And when it gets really tough, just reframe it a bit, or step away from it a bit. Go back to finding those things that you love. You know, I talked about exercise, I talked about mindfulness. Find your happy place and just take a breather. The challenges that people have faced at work, just in life in general, are sometimes quite overbearing. And sometimes it's just stepping aside from that and just taking a breather and reframing it and getting back to it. And find the one or two things that you love to do and go and do them. And shut out from something else and just sit and be present with that. It might be some beautiful music that just makes you feel a bit better. Sometimes we have to take a step away to take a step forward. And in doing that, it sometimes helps us calm down. It sometimes helps us reset and refocus. And then we feel a little better that we can then move forward. Linda?
Thanks so much, Tim. I'm so sorry. I was just struggling to come off mute there.
That's all right.
Thank you so much. I've got a part 2, part 3 to that question. As probably similar again, it's how you might approach well-being, you or others, in times of financial challenge. I know that's something many of us have experienced of times of life, but I think well-being often, it sounds like something we can do when we've got time to spare. What's the approach when we're stretched financially or low resourced? And likewise, if people are time poor, if we feel like we don't have that time at the start of the day to go for a swim or go for a walk, what's your advice around financial challenge, resource challenge, and time challenge for self-care?
Oh, okay. that's a big 3-pronged question. So there's a couple of points in there. One of them is, I spoke a little bit about before. It's a personal choice. Taking care of your mental health is, I believe, a responsibility that sits with you. Yes, it is a personal choice, but I think it's a really important choice. Now, we are all time poor. I don't know anyone you speak to who's not time poor. But getting back to self-care and getting back to saying, okay, how do I put myself in the best position then, even when I'm time poor, to help the others around me? I find that if I take even the smallest bit of time for myself, I'm a morning person, I will get up earlier. I'm glad daylight saving is over because I like to get up quite early in the morning and I don't like it when it's dark. So now I feel like I've got an extra hour in the morning. I use that time wisely. Sometimes I might go for a swim and I might only have 15 minutes, not 30 minutes. But I will still take that time for me. I will still step away and do something for me because I know when I do, I get positive outcomes. I know when I don't, for longer periods of time, it has a negative effect on me. So even when you're time poor, even when you are struggling, it's really important to dig deep and find that little bit of time. It might just be 5 minutes. It might be sitting outside in your favorite spot in the garden or in a park or even grabbing a coffee, whatever it is. Find that time that you can just reset. And remember, it doesn't have to be a long time. Sometimes it can be simply 5 minutes. 5 minutes sitting listening to music could be great. If you're financially stretched, find things that don't cost money. I swim at the ocean pool in Bronte. I don't have to pay to swim in that pool. If I go to a public pool, I have to pay. So it suits me. I like swimming at Bronte, but from a financial perspective, it doesn't take up a lot of money to do that. Some people might have a gym membership and they find that tough. Could you find something to do outside if things are a little tight? Now, I can't solve people's problems from a financial or time poor perspective, but what I can suggest that you do is dig that little bit deeper, be really selfish, understand that when it's really tough, you do have a choice. I've been in situations where I've gone, oh my God, I'm just so stressed at work. Things are coming at me. People are doing, what am I going to do? And I remember one time in particular, I had a choice. I could stop step out, go down to the beach, have a quick bite of lunch, and then come back. Or I could continue in the chaos that I was in that day. I chose to step away for a moment. And if nothing else, when I got back, it gave me a breather and it set things on a slightly different path. The chaos is still there. We still have to deal with it. But part of this building resilience is about being able to deal with this stress on an ongoing basis, because it will continue. We know it will. I can't take it away from you, but just take some time for yourself, and even 5 minutes, and see what impact it has. Thanks, Linda.
I would really echo what Tim has said there. I think one of the key things that a takeaway from that survey we did last year was the purpose of getting that broad range of things was to find more and more things that were reaching for people wherever they were and whatever fit their circumstances. So many of them are free. We had beautiful examples of the importance of helping other people, of listening to music, of going for a walk around the block. For some people, our survey was done during lockdowns. That was quite close to home and very practical in many cases. But I love some of the beautiful comments coming through around practical things that we can do. My next question is for Mel, and I'd like to touch on one of the comments. One of the questions was around the difficulty sometimes of encouraging people to seek help. Mel, why is help seeking so challenging but so important? And I'm hoping you can weave in a few new access examples, but what's the role of stigma, and why can it be so hard to reach out sometimes when people are in a tough spot and feeling low?
Yeah, that is so interesting, Linda. And there's actually so much research that's been done into this area, not just by Beyond Blue, but by various institutions and organisations all around the world that have really looked at small business owners, consistently looked at the mental health of small business owners and how it is that small business owners are at a higher risk because they are proven to be their help-seeking behaviours are much lower. And there's various reasons for that. There's 3 key reasons. So one is that small business owners are extremely time poor. Much more so than people who work for medium to larger size organisations, and that's because they're wearing many hats. They are every part of the organisation. They're doing everything on their own, and they have so little time. And we have people who come into the Nazbo program who have said to us, I knew that my mental health was poor, but I almost thought I don't have time to do anything about it. I knew that I had a problem, but I just didn't have time to do anything about it. And one of the things they really liked about our program was that they could fit it in around their work or their home life because of the accessibility around the program. The other issue is that small business owners have been shown to prioritise the needs of their business over their own personal needs. And that might be that they prioritise the needs of their staff as well. And that's something that we consistently saw during lockdown. We saw business owners that felt so guilty about having to lay staff off or make staff redundant, even though it was completely outside of their control. But they really carried the weight of that themselves. We've also seen business owners who, even though they're unwell, whether that's physically unwell or mentally unwell, they go back to work. And it's because I have to go back to work, I have to open the business, I have to be on the premises, and they put their own health at risk to make sure that their business will survive. Lastly, there's a huge amount of stigma overall around mental health. But this stigma within the small business community is really pronounced. And there is this belief that if you were to put your hand up and ask for help, somehow that equates to you not being successful in business. It's this really distorted belief that just is not accurate. And there are so many people, particularly over the last 2 years in business, who have struggled. They've struggled with their mental health. They've struggled with their finances, and it's completely outside of their control. And it has got no correlation to how successful you are in business. We've seen people accessing the new Access for Small Business Owners program who are some of the most successful business people you could possibly meet. Incredibly successful businesses. Some of them have got international offices. You know, they're just overwhelmingly successful, and it's got no relation whatsoever to your mental health or your financial situation. And I think we have to really dig deep and have a think about that stigma in the industry, because it certainly does prevent people from reaching out for help when help is really needed. The reason why it's so important is that there is strong evidence to show that if people reach out for help early enough, recovery is possible. If we can reach out to people at that time when their mental health is just starting to worsen, when they move from perhaps healthy into not so healthy, when things are not quite right, when people start to feel, you know, I'm not quite myself. Maybe you're starting to have trouble sleeping, or people are starting to say, are you okay? Or you're starting to not perform at work, or you're starting to not enjoy the things you used to enjoy, or you're wanting to withdraw and not talk to other people, you want to isolate. It's at those moments, it's moments that we actually call early intervention moments, where if you reach out and get help, there is strong evidence that shows that recovery is possible, and recovery is possible actually very quickly. And the Nazbo program has shown that recovery can happen in just 6 sessions over 6 weeks. The flip side of that is that if people are left and their mental health worsens so that they get significantly unwell and their mental health becomes severely impacted to the point where they are perhaps considering self-harm or considering suicide, their mental health can perhaps be so severely impacted it can take them a much longer time to recover, and in some severe cases they may never recover. So that's why it's really important we have a look at these help-seeking behaviours. We address these issues that are putting barriers in place, and we really try and help people seek help as early as possible. Thank you, Linda.
That help-seeking point around stigma, there's a couple of beautiful comments in the chat around that role of stigma and that fear of judgment many of us have in reaching out. I think that's not just for new access for small business owners, but much more broadly as well. I think many of us can resonate with that. One of the biggest things that we see when people have reached out, whether it's to a support service or seeing a psychologist or new access for small business owners, is that relief after having taken the step. One of the areas of stigma that there's a lot of research around is self-stigma. It's that challenge and the fear of reaching out. And so I'll remind again, there were some slides I showed right at the start sharing some of the free supports available. This includes Lifeline, it includes the Beyond Blue support service, and many others as well. We'll share these again. These services can be used quite early at an exploratory time as well. And it can help you connect to services in your community, as well as when in crisis, as well as if concerned about others. So I would just stress again that if you ever are looking for immediate support, there are those 24/7 services. And if it's ever an emergency, please dial 000. Thank you so much, Mel, for that beautiful answer. We've got time for a few more questions, so please put the more in the chat. We're getting a few funny comments around Mel's nails and my bookshelf coming through, so thank you very much. Everyone will get a copy of slides. The next theme of questions I was keen to touch on is that role of being an advisor. And this one I'd like to put to Tim, but how you approach having that conversation in a work context, how you approach someone who might not want help, and what are some of the boundaries you might have to put around yourself in that advisor capacity where you might be getting lots of help or not. So Tim, I think very broadly, it'd be great to hear some reflections around that role as an advisor and that mental health opportunity and sometimes burden that comes with it. Tim?
Great. Thanks very much, Linda. I was a bookkeeper for over 10 years, so I dealt with hundreds of small business owners in an advisor capacity. And at times it was quite challenging. I was out of there before the the pandemic of the last 2 years came along, so that added even more challenges for small business. So I wasn't around then, but I think first and foremost, one thing that I've learnt around starting a conversation is the importance of it. If you've noticed change, so this might be with a client, might be with a staff member, might be with a friend. If you've noticed perhaps a change in behaviour, perhaps if they're not absent, so perhaps if they're more absent, if they're not present in meetings, if they're hard to get hold of, they kind of seem to be avoiding you. And often I've been in situations like that and I've thought, oh, what's wrong with me? But maybe there's something going on with them. Most important thing I think to remember is any conversation is a good conversation. You don't need to have a script. You don't need to be briefed on it. Go into it with empathy. Go into it with care and concern, and simply ask them how they're going or check in. And I think in doing that, it's really important that you then, you might ask a couple of questions at the beginning, but then you listen. And listening is a great way to show care. And sometimes they'll open up and sometimes they won't. And then great thing about sessions like today is I hope a lot of you go away with understanding where support is available. Mel told us again about the Nazbo Program for small business owners. There's lots of resources that Linda put up. When you're going into a conversation with someone and you know about some of these resources, then you can sometimes just softly offer some of those resources up. And the one other thing to remember is if you're going into these conversations, you don't need to become their counsellor. And I know as an advisor, if you're running a business with clients that you're working with, that sometimes feels like it might be the case. But if you ask how they are, you listen and maybe offer some areas of support they can go to, that's really a great thing to be able to do. So then in my belief, it's not then my responsibility to fix their situation. That's their journey and it's up to them, and they'll go about it in their way. And the other thing to remember is any answer that they provide you is their answer, and that's the right answer for them. They might not say anything. They might say everything's okay when you kind of think it's not, in particular if it's a staff member. But sometimes allowing them to answer how they want to answer and being present with that is really important. And then maybe just checking in with them again later. They might at some stage become comfortable in opening up with you. They might not. But also just providing some resources and some support to them through information you've learned today is a great way to help perhaps send them on a path that might be really useful to them. But finally, just to wrap up with that, don't be afraid of doing it and go into it with care and empathy, because it just might be the perfect time that you have that conversation with someone that is really important to them. So give it a go. Thanks. Linda?
The next question I wanted to briefly touch on was a really great question in the chat earlier about things that as employers or workplaces we can do, not just for ourselves, but to help those environments, to help the people that we work with, and particularly if we're leaders or managers, where we might be able to help others. Mel and Tim, would you like to give any suggestions there? And I might just pop in with a couple at the end that we've learnt through the Heads Up program as well at Beyond Blue. Mel, would you like to start things that we can do at work to help keep the conversation going, encourage help seeking and keep people well?
Yes, that would be great. We get asked this question a lot, and I think it's great that employers are really interested. I always say to employers, thank you for coming to us with this question, first of all. It shows how invested you are in your teams. I think having regular one-to-ones with your teams are really important. I would encourage doing it at least once a week. Ask how they are, check in with them, see how they're going, get their feedback, see how they're feeling. It's really important, especially now in this kind of post-COVID work environment where perhaps we're still working from home or working in a hybrid environment, and people might still feel a little bit disjointed or a little bit disconnected from in a work environment. I think it's really important to check in on what expectations are as well, so that everyone's on the same playing field and they know exactly what your expectations are from them, and also what their expectations are of you from a management point of view. One thing I will say that we've found extremely successful from the teams that we've worked with is incorporating a well-being plan. These well-being plans are produced by Beyond Blue. They're put together by Beyond Blue. These can be completed by yourself. It's a well-being plan that you can complete yourself. But you can also complete them with your teams, and it's a mental health well-being plan. It's almost like a business plan, but for your mental health. And it helps you put together things that might be triggers, so things that might trigger your mental health that you can be aware of and plan for the future to make sure that you're taking care of your mental health, but also put in place protocols for how you can support your team and look after your team going forward, and be aware of things that might trigger them, and how you can be aware of mental health within your organisation. We have some organisations that we work with who actually make these wellbeing plans a KPI within their organisation, and as a team they create them and complete them together, maybe on a quarterly or a 6-monthly basis, and it's something they collaborate on, and it's a really successful and positive thing that they do together. What I can do is forward these wellbeing plans to Julie beyond the presentation, so everyone can be sent a copy of those, but those are something we would really encourage use of.
Thank you so much, Mel. For the sake of time, I'll just quickly note that on the Heads Up website, headsup.org.au, that's the workplace mental health website created by Beyond Blue, where there's a range of information around ways to create and promote a mentally healthy work site. We will send those links around in addition to what Mel mentioned. I'd just like to quickly pass to Tim for any last comments. That's all from me, so a big thank you. And then after Tim, we'll pass back to Julie. But a very warm thank you to you all.
Thanks very much, Linda. I love the comments that Mel made about how you can take care of your employees, and in particular that wellbeing plan. But I think there's two things for me. One is, as a business leader or as a team leader, taking care of yourself is really important, and I spoke about that a lot in my session. But doing that puts you in the best position to then support your team. So if you're looking after your mental health, if you're feeling really good, if you're having good days, then you're in a great position to help your team. And then I suppose the other section in that is, be the leader that is really open and honest about the importance of mental health within your organisation. Whether you run that organisation yourself, whether you're a team leader, whatever it is, even as an individual sole trader, perhaps with clients, be that person that is really open and honest about taking care of your mental health, and share that through with your team, and allow them to believe and feel the importance of that, so that they go about perhaps doing a wellbeing plan, perhaps understanding what triggers high levels of stress, but most importantly, work out what are the things that bring you joy, that bring you, put you in a position to have better mental health. A lot of things I've talked about. So think about those things, but be that leader, look after yourself, and then be in a great position to be open and honest and supportive of your team. Thanks, Linda, and thanks everybody for listening to me today.
Thank you so much, Tim. There's just a little bit of information there on the slide on ways that you can stay in touch with us. We've also included some information in our hyperlinks document on how to stay in touch with Beyond Blue as well. I just wanted to point out importantly that our YouTube channel does have recordings of all of our webinars, especially the one from today. So if you do subscribe to the channel, you can get a notification when we put up some new content, so you'll be notified when this video goes live. And also you can claim CPE for watching the videos, which is great. Just to finish up today, I wanted to say a big thank you to Mel, to Tim and to Linda. You're very generous today with your time, and it was such a wonderful conversation. I think everyone would have got a lot out of today's session. So thank you once again for coming along and participating in this session. And thanks to everyone as well for contributing to the chat today and for attending in the audience. I think we could have gone for another half an hour at least with all the wonderful questions that we were getting today. Also just want to say, if you are interested in attending more of our webinars, you can jump on our website and go to tpb.gov.au/webinar. And then just the final thing for today, I'll be launching an exit survey. We would really appreciate it if you could take the time to complete it. It's very quick, only takes a moment, and will just pop up in your browser once you leave the session today. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us today. We do hope that you stay safe, enjoy the rest of your day, and hope to speak to you again soon. Thank you.